Hello grade 9s. This time we're going to look at ratio and proportion. So ratio and proportion are basically about fractions and about finding equivalent fractions, finding things that match. So it's really easy to do them with low numbers that are easy to scale up or down. So this first one here, we're looking at how do we get from 2 to 6. Well, we're always looking for numbers that we're multiplying by or dividing by. We're never adding and subtracting. So I'm going to say, what do I multiply 2 by to get to 6? And that's easy enough. That's 3. So whatever I do to the top of my fraction, I do the same thing to the bottom of my fraction. So that means 2/5 is the same thing as 6, and then all I do is times this by 3 to 15. So you should be able to see that this is just a scaled up version of that. If I simplify this fraction, I'll get back down to this. So they're in proportion to each other. Now, x can be anywhere. It can be on the bottom, it can be on the top, it can be on the left or the right. It does not matter. So what I'm going to do for the second one is exactly the same thing. I'll look at the information I do have, which is the bottom this time. So how do I get from 7 to 28? Hopefully you know that that's just timesing by 4. So I do the same thing to the top. So you don't need to write it out like this every time. I'm happy for you just to tell me what the variable is. So x is 16 in this case because 4 times 4 is 16. Now, this is clearly a lot easier to do with smaller numbers. Once you start scaling things up, then sometimes it becomes slightly less obvious. So you might be able to see that 15 times 6 is 90. That's fine. If you can see that, great. But if you can't, we're going to learn something called the ratio method. Now, this is something you have to learn regardless of whether you can do this or not, because you can't always have easily scalable numbers. Sometimes you might have to multiply by fractions or decimals, and that can be a bit confusing. And you can't do that off the top of your head. So let's learn this method together. So I'm going to do something called cross multiplication. So I'm going to multiply these two things, and I'm going to multiply these two things. So 90 times 500. So that's just these two equals these two multiplied. So 15 times x. Now remember, I don't need to write a times sign. 15x means 15 times x. No sign always means multiplication. So then I need to get x by itself. So first of all, let's do this. So 9 times 5 is 45. And then I've got 3 zeros I need to add. So then this one here, I need to get x by itself. So remember, 15 is multiplying x. So to undo that, I do the opposite, which is division. So I'm going to divide this by 15. Now you can type this into a calculator if you want. You should get 3,000. So that makes sense to me, right? So x equals 3,000 because we said 15 times 6 is 90. So 500 times 6 is 3,000. And that's a way you can go back and check to make sure it works. But this is a really good way to do it. Cross multiplication, which is known as the ratio method. Okay, moving on. Now we have swinging jewelry. So there's another way we're going to learn how to solve some of these things called the unitary method. The unitary method is kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like 1, right? Because we're always getting things down to a single unit. So in this case, I'm looking at this piece of information to understand what units they want. So they want hours. So what I'm going to say is if 1,000 books are printed in half an hour, well, that means 1 hour is going to be 2,000 books. So now all I have to do is get this scaled up to 3 hours. That's pretty easy. All I'm going to do is times it by 3, which means I'm going to have 6,000 books. So that's relatively simple. All you do is find 1 and then you just scale it up to how much you need. Let's do another one here. So if I have 600 deliveries, so this one I scaled up, this one I'm going to scale down. So I have 600 deliveries in 3 days, but I need 1 day. So I'm going to divide this by 3. So that means I have 200 deliveries in 1 day. So then what I need to know is how many deliveries are in 2 weeks. So I take this number that I've got, 200 for 1 day, and then I times it by 14 because there are 14 days in 2 weeks. So 14 times 2 is 28, and then I've got 2 zeros. So that means that there are 2,800 deliveries in 2 weeks from this company. So this is the unitary method. Let's go and have a look at an example, and I will do both methods and show you that you get the same answer. generally speaking, you can pick either method. If the question tells you which method to use, you need to do that. But if it doesn't specify, you can do whatever you like. So let's use this example. Tin and copper are mixed at a ratio of 8:3. How much tin is needed for 36 grams of copper? So for the ratio method, I'm going to turn these into fractions. So tin to copper is 8:3. So for the second one, I need to decide which piece of information I have and which one I don't. So I know 36 grams is copper, and copper was the second one, which was 3, so it belongs on the bottom. So these are the copper ones and these are the tin ones. Now I don't know this, so that's going to be my x. So for the ratio method, I'm going to do my cross multiplication. So I'm going to multiply these two things. So that means it doesn't matter whether you do this or this first, it's irrelevant. So I'm going to do 8 times 36 because why not? 8 times 36 equals 3 times x. So the first thing we do is you can use a calculator for all of this if you would like. So 8 times 36 is 288. And that's going to equal 3x. And then we just have to divide by 3 to get it by itself. So x is 96. Now, the one thing I haven't done here is put in grams, which I need to do because I always want to relate the unit of measurement back to the question. So if the question talks about grams, you write grams. If it's kilometers or dollars, whatever it is, make sure you include that in your answer. So if we use the unitary method, we will get exactly the same answer, but this one's a little bit trickier because we've got weird fractions this time, and I'll show you what that means. So the unitary method, I know that I have 8 grams of tin for 3 grams of copper, right? So what I need to do is find 1 gram. I'm going to find 1 gram of copper, right? Because that's the one I know to scale up. So 1 gram of copper, well, all I've done is divide 3 by 1. So I'm going to do the same for this. So 8/3 of a gram of copper is the same as, of tin is the same as 1 gram of copper. So I've got annoying fractions here, but that's okay. We'll get the same answer either way. As we go further and further in maths in high school, we tend to leave things as improper fractions. You can turn it into a mixed number if you want, but it's unnecessary and won't help. So feel free to leave things as improper fractions the more we go. Unless you're told not to, I would suggest that you can. So then, to get from 1 gram of copper to 36 grams of copper, all I'm going to do is times it by 36, right? So then I do the same to both sides. So 8/3 times 36, and you can use a calculator for that if you want, and you will get the same answer, 96 grams. Again, I'm going to use grams. Now, I've lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was going to say. Whatever, doesn't matter. Okay, so you can pick either one of these methods. It really doesn't matter to me unless the question specifies, then you can do it. Personally, I prefer this method. I think there's less room for error. I think it's more straightforward, but you are welcome to do whatever you would like. So if you've got any questions, please drop me an email. Otherwise, you can head over to Google Classroom to do your questions from the textbook. All right, good luck.